Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS Inform. Oftentimes on WJTS Inform, we have programs about abuse that happens in the area. Today, we're going to talk with an actual victim. The identity will be hidden from you, and hopefully you won't be able to recognize who it is. But we're going to talk to this person about something that happened to them in the past. And hopefully we can glean some information, or we can get people to start being aware that if something happens, go forward and get some actions done. And when this happened, this was many years ago. Now there is a whole lot of resources for folks to go to if you feel that in some way you need to go to somebody. We'd like to welcome you to the show. It's going to be a difficult show, I'm sure, for both of us. But first of all, let's start by right out front. What sort of abuse happened to you?
I was sexually assaulted.
And at what stage in your life did this happen?
I was 16 when it happened.
I don't want to really get the details, but can you give us an idea of how it happened, like where? Because sometimes we go, this doesn't happen in our community, this doesn't happen around here.
It happened in Du Bois County. I was asked to go have a drink and accepted to go have that drink. And the rest of the evening is pretty fuzzy, like things come in and out of the person did things that were not okay to me without my consent.
And this happened a number of years ago. At that time, did you even think of going to somebody for help?
No, I wasn't. With the way that our community is, I wanted to protect my family. The person that did this was a very good friend, maybe even related to one of my really good friends. And I didn't think at the time that I could do it.
Now, sometimes people blame the victim. Do you feel any guilt?
I do. I think all the time, why didn't I just not go have that drink? And if I wouldn't have went to have that drink, then that wouldn't have happened. Logically, I know that just because you go and have a drink with somebody doesn't mean that you're asking for them to assault you. But that's one of the thoughts that runs through my head.
Were you underage at the time?
I was 16.
Okay. Why come forward now? Why tell your story now?
I feel like the timing is right for me, and it's going to be therapeutic and helpful for me to talk about it. And my hope is that it helps other victims to know that everybody deals with things differently, to where I do have regret that I didn't come forward when it happened. And maybe just help those out there who are going through the same thing.
Has the perpetrator ever been convicted, arrested, charged?
No, I never told my story for that to happen.
Then do you regret that now?
I do. I've heard after the fact that he's done that to other people, which makes me feel guilty, like I maybe could have saved those other girls.
Is there something you'd like people to know about? Because I guess back at the time this would have happened, there weren't necessarily the resources there are now. Teachers weren't trained like they are now. Policemen weren't trained necessarily like they are now. Or there weren't resources available that there are now. Did that make it more difficult for you because you didn't think about going?
It did. When it happened, I was questioned by law enforcement, which was challenging because it's hard to talk to a man about something that another man did. And it was hard because you don't want to say that you were drinking because you weren't old enough to be drinking. And so the way that the situation unfolded after the assault happened was also pretty traumatic.
It's got to be tough for somebody then to come forward and talk about it now. And I know right now we've got the hashtag #MeToo movement. Why wait so long? It's why didn't you do something then? I think a lot of times people say to the victim, well, you should have done something then. It's too late to come out now. What made you come out now, and why didn't you come out then?
I don't know. It's I prayed about it and just felt that the time was right for me to maybe get it off of my chest and to move forward and to help others with it.
How does this influence your day now Every day you know this.
I'm much more aware of people around me. I don't really drink, and if I do drink, I make sure that I'm with safe people if that's going to happen. Um, you just don't really trust people like you did before.
I guess if for young girls listening now or older women, what is something you want them to know that you necessarily did not know?
That there are people to help you now, and that it's okay to talk about it. Um, I still want to protect my identity today, and it's funny because it's not even to protect it for myself, it's to protect my family or my friends, and to not deal with the backlash that comes from that, to where I don't want my family to be asked a million questions of what happened and who was it and things like that. And I don't want them to have to deal with the secondary trauma of them feeling like, oh crap, I should have done something.
Or I had a suspicion I should have gone forward, said something, pushed it a little heavier. But there are things that people can do now. If a woman is violated, there are things that she can do, places she can go, contacts she can make. Is that really important? Would that have maybe made a difference for you?
That would have made a huge difference. If I would have been able to talk to somebody, a female, instead of a male officer, if I would have felt that I had a support to move forward, and if there were repercussions of, I went to a very small school, and so if I would have had somebody that I could have talked to about how that could have played out, I think I would have been able to come forward.
But there weren't necessarily the resources at that time that there are now.
Not that I ever knew of.
Yeah. So why are you here today? What compels you to get your message out for other people? Because you haven't identified your perpetrator. You are dealing with this every day. What message do you want to get by being on WJTS Inform?
I just want other victims to know that they're not alone, that they can talk to somebody about what happened, even if they're not ready to come forward to name their perpetrator or anything like that. They still have people they could talk to, they have resources, and that everybody deals with everything differently, and that's okay.
Well, and there will be a time when it is right. Like today is a good time for you to at least start talking about it.
Yes.
It's just got to be hard every day to have to deal with this, to know that person's still out there, that your family doesn't know. Do you feel like you're alone in this?
Kinda. It gets easier every day to where I don't have to see that perpetrator. I haven't seen the perpetrator in what I would say is a long time. Um, After the assault happened, maybe a year later, I went to, I was like at a party or something, and he came, and it was interesting because he came and I was sitting, and he stood on like the bench where I was sitting, and just towered over me. And at that moment, I realized that even though that situation was over, he still was able to intimidate me. He was still able to have that control and power almost over me. And so I think the reason I deal with it is because I don't have to see him in that sense.
Is it unfortunate that maybe sometimes we feel, especially the woman, well, I'm on a date, he's bought me supper, he's bought me a drink, I owe him something?
I think that society makes it very challenging because I think that that is sometimes portrayed, which is not the case at all. But I think society makes it challenging not just for, women, but for just anybody, if you feel that sense of obligation. And I think that it also just makes you look at things differently.
Do you think the perpetrator knows he did wrong? Or is it possible he doesn't really realize that he did something wrong?
I think he knows he did wrong. I think he knows he did wrong.
And probably in almost every case that's probably the truth.
I would guess so. There's a lot of anger and resentment that comes with it, to where I remember when it was happening, I said no, I said stop, I said please don't do that. And while I felt like I was being loud, he didn't stop. And I felt like I was being loud enough that, the other people that were in the building would have also heard it or come or said something. So there's a lot of just resentment as to why didn't he stop, or why didn't somebody come and make him stop. And so I think that if somebody's yelling at you to stop, telling you not to do something, and you continue to do it, you have to know that what you did was not okay.
Do you feel that in the small community like we live, and whether it's Du Bois County or whether it's a neighborhood in New York City, people know each other and are very secretive about what happens within their families? Is that some of why you don't say much, or didn't say much back then?
I don't want people to look at me like I'm a victim. I don't want them to look at me differently and have pity on me or feel sorry for me. And I also don't want my family and friends to have to deal with the questions, or, sometimes you feel like, are they going to believe me? And so then is it to where people pick sides? Well, she's making that up, or yeah, I believe her, and then it turns into a whole bigger mess than what it was to begin with. And I just never wanted to deal with that.
But the best thing would be to go forward, to contact, say, Crisis Connection, or to talk to a police officer or a friend to get something going, to get something stopped.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for being our guest on WJTS in.form. And we want to point out, and this is like part of a two-part series, we'll have another show tomorrow night here on 18 WJTS when we will be talking with people who are helping victims. And we want you to know that there are places you can go, Crisis Connection, for instance. And if you're a child, there is the Southwest Indiana Child Advocacy Coalition Center that does great work to help children, or to do the forensic interviews. We've had guests here on WJTS about that. So join us tomorrow night, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what you heard tonight and what it could mean. Thank you to our guest. Thank you for watching WJTS. We are local people watching local people.